one of the really great analogies that was given to me once was by an Aboriginal researcher called Alec Brown, Professor Alec Brown in South Australia. And he was determined to assist his people. He knew cardiovascular disease was a major issue for them. He went out and worked on cardiovascular disease, became a real expert in it, and then said, I went to the middle of Australia to help my people. And he talked to the elders about it around the fire, and they said, come back tomorrow, we'll talk about it. And when he came back the next day, they had a painting for it. And at the bottom of that painting was cardiovascular disease. One step up was drugs, alcohol, substance abuse. One step up was racism, dispossession, family trauma. So what they could see was that cardiovascular disease was essentially a symptom of a greater malaise. They knew it was all interconnected. And what he was doing was essentially just tapping into the very end of a terrible journey for them. So those wise elders had experienced life, the traumas of it, and were seeing the physical consequences. And I think that's something that we need to do as a group, to look at all the different aspects and not work in isolation. The idea of spirituality, as you said, is so important as well, and it's an undervalued aspect for our society. Aboriginal society really believes in spirituality, their connectedness to land. Dispossess them from their land, you take away their soul. And there's an emptiness in them. And I think we in Western society have sort of lost a connection with land and spirituality, and there's a void that's there for a lot of us. So that wonderful pie to that diagram with all the flowers around is so accurate. Let me just tell you just three snapshots for me in my own life. And when I look back on it now, as I'm rapidly aging and coming towards the sunset of life, right? There was that incredible period in your youth when you're full of energy, bursting with testosterone, as Boo said. Right? It's just pouring out, literally coming out of your pores, and you're running around like a lunatic. You've got so much energy. You've got energy to burn, but it's also a period of uncertainty because you're still trying to work out who you are. There is that search for identity. Where am I? Who am I? And where do I fit into this world? And so there's a mental issue, a social issue, as well as a really active physical issue that's going on. And it's a challenging time for young men to work out, well, who am I? Where do I fit into this world? Can I find a partner? Where do I go? Have I got a job? So I was in amongst that group. I was fit, I was healthy, played a lot of sport. You can see the results. These were the hands of a concert pianist. No, I'm just kidding. But when you're in a footy club, you do some crazy things. In those days, drinking was de rigueur after a game. You drive home and there's this stuff you just wouldn't do these days. So there's a lot of risk taking, and when I stopped playing organised sport, I decided to go into a couple of other areas. I got really into diving and surfing. Absolutely loved those two things because they were not directly competitive, but what you're doing is you're challenging yourself. You're going into an alien environment, and for me, there was a challenge around facing your fears. I had a fear of sharks, so I was determined to confront that. And I've got to tell you, looking back now, I'm bloody lucky to be here. I had at least 3 very, very close encounters with sharks. And it's ironic that I'm now overseeing the shark drumline trial down in Margaret River. Should have kept people like me safe, right? But that was the sort of thing I did without thinking about it. Risk-taking, serious risk-taking. Having got through that period, got married and had kids, I got into another part of my life, which those middle years, which are really interesting as well when I look back on them, because they were crazy years. They were crazy years because your career is taking off, you're so busy at work, and you've got a family, and you're so devoted to your family. And a couple of messages that were coming through to me at that stage were really important because they affected how I behaved. There was a message coming through that Australia was a lazy country and we didn't work hard enough. I was determined to prove them wrong. I worked bloody hard. There was another message coming through that men did not contribute in families. And I was determined to prove them wrong. All right? So, I talk about 4 pillars in my life. There is my family, my friends, my work, and myself. And if you then focus on your work and your family, and you devote so much of your time and your energy to those areas, you forget about 2 other things. Your friends and yourself. I stopped looking after myself. Right? I stopped exercising because I was too busy working. I stopped meeting with friends because I was too busy. In the old days after work, men would go down to the pub, they'd have a beer with their mates, then they'd toddle off home. Who's got time to do that these days, realistically? Everyone's working and phones going, the emails are going off, all sorts of things are happening. It's just, you're on all the time. And so for me, I became unbalanced. Those 4 pillars of my life were out of proportion, and that affected me. All right? I ended up clinically depressed. And it manifested itself in a loss of weight, and I wasn't aware that I was struggling until a good friend of mine saw me and said, "What's wrong?" They thought I had cancer, they thought I was dying because I was wasting away in front of them. In actual fact, having done a whole slew of tests, there's nothing wrong with me physically. Mentally, I was in trouble. Right? I was fortunate that I found a great psychiatrist that I met, had 3 sessions with him, and that turned my life because he said, "Here are the issues, bang, 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 bang. What are you going to do about them?" Right? Once it was clear to me, it was like a light bulb moment. Didn't have to take any drugs, didn't do anything like that. It was just very clear. Here are the issues that you're facing, and here are the sorts of things that you can do to address them. That was a really important turning point in my life because I came out of that empowered, I came out of that stronger, I came out of that feeling I can deal with this. And that was uplifting. So I got through that crazy period, and then I've come into the autumn of my life, and there are different challenges now. There are different challenges that you face, different opportunities as well. And the interesting thing is when you try to balance the good and the bad, and sometimes there's a tipping point where you can get overwhelmed. And a period of my life not too long ago where the foundations of my life were taken away from me. And sorry. It was horrible. I just didn't feel like living. I reached a point where I thought, it is not worth me being on this planet. So easy to get to that point where you think, it's just not worth it. And what turned it around for me was a single phone call from a friend who thought, "You don't sound right. Something's not right." And that moment turned for me. It was like another light bulb. There was someone reaching out. And that's the issue. That's when men really need help. No one would have known I was in trouble. No one would have known. No one would have known if I disappeared. But there are just tiny little clues. Tiny little clues. And you need to have that bridge between the person who's struggling and someone who can help them. Be it a professional, be it a friend, be it a family person. And you only get to know that when you get to know people well, and you can see something's not right. And then you need to, the Are You OK movement is fantastic. because that has empowered people to say, are you okay? Are you really okay? Come on over here. Let's just get over by the fire and then we'll have a yarn. Those moments are so important. You cannot forget them. So for me now, I am fit, I'm healthy, I get checked up all the time. I really enjoy going to my GP just to check my cholesterols and stuff like that. Take pride in all of that. But there were those key moments in my life where it could have been different. It could have been very, very different. And that can happen so quickly. That can happen so quickly that you just need to be there to assist people when they're struggling. And I would encourage all of you to make sure that we have those connections, keep those connections going. They are incredibly important because time goes very quickly. Things can happen in an instant and then it's too late. So, on that cheery note, Christ, I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to go into this morbid little space, but I guess I'm just one of those people. I'm one of those guys who has experienced so many wonderful highs in my life, but there are times when you struggle. Everyone's going to go through a period when you struggle, right? What did the Buddha say? This too will pass. You'll have good times, you'll have bad times. There's another good saying too. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So make sure you don't let someone cark it, right? It's really important that we support each other, and that's where our society, when we fracture, when we go off on our own and we're isolated, we don't care for each other. We don't have the time. And it's so important that we do make sure that we have the connections. That is such a human thing. And I don't think you can actually get it over Facebook. I just don't think you can get it over Instagram. I think it's real. It's about that human connection. You look someone in the eye and you know if they're struggling or not. They don't have to say anything, but you can tell. So on that note, thank you so much for putting up with me. I apologise for the torrent of tears, but this is such an important conversation that I'd just like to thank Spinnaka for putting this up here, and thank you for the opportunity to share my story that I haven't shared. I'm presuming this is in the cone of silence, right? No. For those of you that remember Maxwell Smart. Okay. Thank you very much.